and have been since February of 1985. It's there. It's a part of our life, and it sucks.
Randall Church, known affectionately as Randy, entered the world on September 26, 1961, in the quiet town of Havre, Montana. He was the fourth child born to Richard and Darlene Church, part of a close-knit family that included 4 siblings: Rick, Robert, Ruby, and Mary. The Church household was full of activity, laughter, and the kind of warmth that comes from growing up in small-town America during a simpler time. Among the siblings, Randy stood out for his gentle nature and his natural ability to connect with everyone around him. His sister Ruby often recalls that he was the golden child, describing him as a kind-hearted, easygoing soul who brought light and balance into their home.
Now that they are getting technology involved and they are getting more resources and they are getting things out there.
It's got to be an effort that's supported by, the upper levels, and I think that that support up until now anyway, or up until recently, has not been there.
I was very surprised they never found the killer up to now. I was totally surprised. I'm like, what? This happens often where they don't find the killer? Are you kidding me?
Randy's childhood was marked by curiosity and creativity. He was constantly in motion, building model rockets, tinkering with his bicycle, and exploring the neighborhood to visit cousins and friends. Even as a boy, he showed a fascination for how things worked, whether it was a household appliance or a simple toy engine. His parents noticed early on that Randy had a mind for detail and a strong work ethic, traits that would define him throughout his life. While many kids his age were preoccupied with play, Randy spent hours helping his father with small projects and often found ways to earn a little pocket money. One of his earliest jobs was as a shoeshine boy, a role he took great pride in despite its simplicity. He understood the value of hard work and the satisfaction that came from earning something on his own. Family members say he never complained, no matter how small or tedious the task. Whether mowing lawns, delivering papers, or cleaning up after others, Randy approached every responsibility with quiet determination. Ruby remembers one vivid story from their childhood that still brings both laughter and tears when told. She recalled a day when Randy and one of their brothers got into a typical sibling argument near the screen door. In the heat of the moment, Randy tried to push it open but accidentally struck the glass portion, shattering it and cutting his wrist badly. Blood poured from the wound, and panic filled the house as their parents rushed him to the hospital. Their mother stayed close by his side as doctors stitched his wrist while their father, overwhelmed by the sight, fainted in the middle of the emergency room. "Dad went down like a rock," Ruby laughed. The nurse yelled, "Doc, we got another one over here." That moment, while terrifying at the time, became one of those unforgettable family stories that revealed the strength and spirit of the Church family. Randy made a full recovery, of course, and carried the faint scar as a lifelong reminder of childhood mischief. Growing up, Randy's gentle demeanor and willingness to help others made him well-liked by everyone who knew him. He never sought attention, preferring instead to show his character through actions rather than words. Friends remember him as dependable, funny in a quiet way, and deeply respectful. He was the kind of person who treated everyone the same, whether they were a close friend or a stranger. As the years passed, his curiosity and diligence translated into academic promise. His teachers noted his focus and intelligence, particularly in science and mathematics. Randy's fascination with how things worked evolved into an interest in engineering, an interest that would shape his future. When he graduated from high school, it was no surprise to anyone that he set his sights on higher education. In 1985, Randy enrolled at Montana State University, majoring in engineering with dreams of building a future grounded in innovation and problem-solving. His journey from a small-town boy with model rockets to a young man on the path to becoming an engineer reflected not just ambition, but the strength of his upbringing. Randy's story began in love, laughter, and promise. But as his family would soon discover, the bright future they all imagined for him would come to a tragic and heartbreaking end. By 1985, Randy Church had built a life defined by discipline, education, and responsibility. After enrolling at Montana State University in Bozeman, he majored in electrical engineering, a field that perfectly aligned with his methodical mind and his lifelong curiosity for how things functioned. Professors described him as focused, hardworking, and humble, the kind of student who stayed late to solve complex equations and never hesitated to help classmates struggling with the material. His grade point average was an impressive 3.4, evidence of both intelligence and consistency. Randy was not a man of shortcuts. Every success he achieved came from effort, precision, and quiet perseverance. But college life wasn't easy. Coming from a modest background, Randy supported himself through various part-time jobs. Among them, the most consistent was his position at Pizza Hut in Bozeman. What began as a simple job quickly became another example of his dedication. Within months, he was promoted to shift manager, a position that reflected his reliability and leadership. Co-workers respected him, often noting that he never raised his voice, never complained, and always stayed behind to ensure everything was done right. The restaurant itself was a small but busy location on the edge of town, a familiar stop for students and locals alike. Randy's meticulous nature often made him the last one out the door. He was known to be a slow closer, not because of inefficiency, but because of his insistence that everything be spotless. Every table wiped, every surface sanitized, every register counted twice. He believed in leaving things better than he found them, a trait that defined his approach to both work and life. In February 1985, a simple act of kindness placed Randy on a shift that would tragically become his last. One of his co-workers needed the night off, and without hesitation, Randy volunteered to cover. It was a decision he didn't think twice about, one rooted in the selflessness that everyone admired in him. He was scheduled to close late that night and reopen the restaurant early the next morning. For most people, that would have been exhausting. For Randy, it was just another chance to be dependable. The night began routinely. Randy worked with another employee, following Pizza Hut's standard policy of having two people close together for safety and accountability. They handled the cleanup, tallied the sales, and locked up the dining area. As the clock moved past midnight, the restaurant emptied, and Bozeman's quiet streets were calm under the winter sky. Around 3:01 a.m., Randy, ever diligent, sent his co-worker home. He assured them that he would finish the final tasks himself, something he had done many times before without issue. Inside the restaurant, the faint hum of refrigerators and the rhythmic buzz of fluorescent lights filled the air. Randy went about his usual end-of-night checklist, cleaning, mopping, and securing the cash drawer. Nothing about that night appeared out of the ordinary. Yet somewhere between routine and morning, something went terribly wrong. The next morning, another employee arrived to open the restaurant, expecting to find Randy ready for another long day. But both the front and back doors were locked, and repeated knocks went unanswered. Concerned, the employee used a nearby payphone to call the general manager, who arrived shortly after. Together, they unlocked the door and stepped into silence. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Randy was lying on the floor near the register, lifeless. He had been shot twice. The cash drawer was empty, and signs of a robbery were immediately apparent. The scene was both orderly and violent, a space that had been meticulously cleaned by a man known for his care, now marred by a senseless act of brutality. Bozeman police were called immediately. Officers sealed off the area, documenting every inch of the restaurant. But the crime left more questions than answers. Who would target Randy? A man without enemies, without conflict, and without reason for harm. Why that night? Why him? In the span of a few hours, a bright young man's life had been extinguished, leaving a family, a community, and a small Montana town in stunned disbelief. Morning came slowly to Bozeman on February 8, 1985. The air was biting cold, the kind that burned your lungs when you breathed. At around 7 a.m., the first Pizza Hut employee of the day arrived for the morning shift, expecting to find Randy already inside, cleaning up or prepping dough like he always did. But something was wrong. The building was eerily dark, and both front doors were still locked from the inside. Randy was never late. After several minutes of knocking and calling his name with no response, the uneasy employee decided to call the restaurant manager. Within minutes, the manager arrived, visibly concerned. Together, they unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence was heavy. No clatter of dishes, no smell of baking crust, no cheerful hum of the morning radio. The restaurant, which should have been buzzing with early prep, felt frozen in time. They took a few cautious steps forward. Then just beyond the counter near the register, they saw him. Randy Church was lying face down on the floor, motionless. A dark pool had formed beneath him, spreading across the tiles. The cash register drawer was open and empty. The sight sent shockwaves through both of them. The manager immediately backed away, rushed to the phone, and called the police. Within minutes, the Bozeman Police Department responded. Officers sealed off the area and began documenting the scene. Detectives and evidence technicians soon arrived, working carefully not to disturb anything. It was immediately clear that this wasn't a random accident. It was a homicide. Randy had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. The shots were fired at close range, and judging from his position, he had likely been taken by surprise. Investigators noted several key details right away. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no pried locks, no kicked doors. That suggested that Randy may have willingly opened the door for someone he knew or trusted. The cash register was completely emptied, leading police to consider robbery as the most likely motive. But if it was a robbery, why kill Randy? He had a reputation for being polite and compliant, someone who would have handed over money without resistance. Outside, word of the murder spread quickly through Bozeman. Pizza Hut employees, university classmates, and local residents gathered near the taped-off parking lot, watching in disbelief as investigators worked inside. For a town like Bozeman, quiet, close-knit, and largely untouched by violent crime, the murder of a 23-year-old college student in a family restaurant was unimaginable. Detectives began interviewing co-workers, customers, and anyone who had been near the restaurant that night. One co-worker confirmed that Randy had volunteered to cover a shift for someone else, an act of kindness that now seemed tragically fateful. Another recalled that Randy had mentioned planning to clean up alone after his partner left, something he often did out of pride for his work. The search for physical evidence turned up little. No fingerprints other than Randy's and other employees were found on the register or the doors. No shell casings were recovered, suggesting the killer had taken them, a move that indicated experience or at least a deliberate effort to hide their tracks. The murder weapon, presumed to be a small-caliber handgun, was never found. Detectives expanded their investigation beyond the restaurant. They checked nearby businesses, hoping security cameras might have captured something, but in 1985 such technology was limited. They canvassed neighborhoods, asking if anyone had heard gunshots or seen anything unusual in the early morning hours. One nearby resident reported hearing a loud noise around 3:30 a.m., but dismissed it at the time as a car backfiring. As the hours turned to days, Randy's family was notified. His parents, stunned by the news, drove from their home in Kalispell to Bozeman to identify their son's body. The grief was unbearable. Friends and family remembered Randy as someone who worked hard for everything he had, who never sought trouble, and who deserved none of what happened. Bozeman police held a press conference later that week, assuring the public they were doing everything possible. They emphasized that while robbery appeared to be the motive, they weren't ruling out other possibilities. Still, behind the official statements, detectives privately admitted they were facing a puzzle with too few pieces. There were no eyewitnesses, no surveillance footage, no clear suspect. Just a murdered young man and a town full of questions. The investigation had only just begun, but already, it was clear that finding Randy Church's killer would not be easy. In the weeks following the murder, the Bozeman Police Department poured all its energy into solving the case. The homicide of a hard-working 23-year-old college student in such a small, peaceful community shocked not only Montana, but also neighboring states. Every day, local newspapers ran updates about the investigation, hoping someone would come forward with a crucial tip. Detectives began by retracing Randy's final hours. They reconstructed his shift timeline. He clocked in at around 5 p.m. to help during the evening rush, then stayed late to close the restaurant, something he was known for. The last confirmed sighting of Randy alive was around 3 a.m., when his co-worker left him alone to finish cleaning. From that moment onward, Randy's fate was unknown until his body was found the next morning. Investigators began to dig into Randy's life, not because they suspected him of wrongdoing, but because understanding his habits might help identify who would have wanted to harm him. By all accounts, Randy was loved by everyone. Professors described him as a bright, motivated student. Co-workers called him dependable and kind, His family said he had no enemies, no debts, and no involvement in anything criminal. This lack of motive made the case even more baffling. Police initially believed the crime was a robbery gone wrong. The open cash register drawer supported that theory. However, as detectives examined the evidence more closely, they began to doubt it. For one, the amount of money stolen was relatively small, only a few $100s. If robbery had been the killer's main goal, it was a high-risk, low-reward act. Second, Randy had been shot twice at close range, a level of violence that seemed personal rather than opportunistic. Detectives began to wonder if Randy had known his killer. There were no signs of forced entry, meaning the perpetrator had likely been let inside voluntarily. Randy was a rule follower, and Pizza Hut policy stated that doors were to remain locked after closing. The only people he might have opened the door for were trusted co-workers, management, or delivery personnel. The police interviewed every employee who had worked with Randy, including the co-worker who left at 3 a.m. That co-worker was cooperative and visibly shaken, but detectives had to rule out every possibility. After several rounds of questioning and a successful polygraph test, they were cleared. Attention then turned toward other possible suspects, disgruntled former employees, customers who had behaved aggressively, or anyone who might have had a grudge. Police received multiple tips about a man seen near the restaurant that night, wearing a dark jacket and pacing by the back entrance. Unfortunately, by the time they investigated, the lead had gone cold. Investigators also explored the possibility of a transient or drifter passing through Bozeman who might have targeted the restaurant. In the mid-1980s, Bozeman was growing but still retained the atmosphere of a small town where everyone knew each other. Random violence was rare but not impossible. Detectives checked nearby bus and train stations, motels, and rest stops. Still, nothing concrete emerged. Meanwhile, the community rallied around the Church family. Candlelight vigils were held at Montana State University, where students lit candles and prayed for justice. Randy's professors established a temporary memorial fund to honor his life and academic dedication. His family, while heartbroken, remained hopeful that the police would soon find answers. But as weeks turned into months, leads began to dry up. Forensic analysis in 1985 was limited. DNA testing didn't yet exist in practical form, and fingerprint recovery yielded no usable results. Ballistic testing determined the bullets came from a .22 caliber firearm, one of the most common guns in America, offering detectives little help. Still, detectives refused to give up. They examined similar crimes across Montana and neighboring states, looking for patterns, perhaps a string of robberies involving Pizza Huts or other restaurants. They contacted law enforcement agencies in Idaho, North Dakota, and Wyoming, but no matching cases surfaced. Some investigators developed a chilling theory that Randy's murder may have been committed by someone familiar with restaurant operations, possibly an ex-employee or a person who knew the closing routine. This theory fit the evidence. The killer entered without force, went straight for the cash register, and seemed to know when Randy would be alone. But with no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, and no weapon, the case remained frustratingly open. Randy's sister Ruby later recalled those months as some of the darkest in her life. "Every time the phone rang, we hoped it was the police with good news," she said in a later interview. But it was always nothing. They'd tell us they were still working on it, but it just felt like Randy was slipping further into silence. By the end of 1985, the investigation had slowed to a crawl. Detectives had exhausted every tangible lead. Still, they kept the case open, determined to find justice, even if it took years. And as it turned out, it would take decades. As the years passed, the Church family's grief didn't fade. It transformed into determination. Randy's death left a scar that never healed. His parents, Richard and Darlene, tried to keep the family strong, but every holiday, every family gathering, carried an empty chair that no one dared to fill. For Ruby, Randy's older sister, the loss of her golden child brother changed her forever. Randy was the kind of person who brought joy wherever he went, Ruby once said. After he was gone, it felt like the color drained out of everything. The Church family initially believed justice would come quickly. Detectives had assured them they were working tirelessly on the case. But as time passed, updates grew infrequent and calls went unreturned. By the early 1990s, the investigation had gone completely cold. The Church family's pain deepened with each unanswered question. Ruby, however, refused to let Randy's name fade into silence. In the late 1990s, when the internet was still new, she began collecting everything she could find about her brother's murder. Old newspaper clippings, archived reports, and even handwritten notes from former investigators. She created binders filled with every piece of evidence, determined to understand what had gone wrong. Her biggest frustration was the lack of progress from law enforcement. They kept saying there were no new leads, Ruby said. But I always wondered, were they really looking? When Ruby contacted the Bozeman Police Department for updates, she was often told the same thing. No new evidence, no suspects, no movement. Yet she knew deep down that someone out there had answers. Somebody knows something, she said. You don't just walk into a restaurant, kill a man, and disappear forever. That belief became the foundation of Ruby's lifelong mission. She began writing letters to local newspapers asking them to revisit the case. Most declined. But in 2005, on the 20th anniversary of Randy's death, one small Bozeman paper published a short remembrance article that reignited local awareness. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ruby also connected with advocacy groups focused on cold cases. Through them, she learned about DNA advancements and how older cases were being reopened across the country. In 2010, she reached out to the Bozeman Police Department once again, requesting that Randy's evidence be reviewed using modern forensic testing. The department agreed to re-examine what they had, but the results were disappointing. Much of the physical evidence from the crime scene had degraded over time. Still, Ruby didn't stop. She started a Facebook page titled, "Somebody Knows Something Somewhere: The Murder of Randy Church." It became a digital memorial and a rallying point for anyone who remembered her brother. Every week she posted photos, memories, and pleas for information. People from all over Montana joined the page, former classmates, co-workers, even strangers who had never met Randy but were moved by his story. Ruby often used her platform to remind followers of who Randy was beyond the headlines: a kind, driven young man with dreams of becoming an engineer. She shared photos of him grinning beside his car, working on model rockets, or playing with neighborhood kids. "I want people to see more than a victim," she wrote. "I want them to see the person whose life was stolen." Over time, Ruby's advocacy began to draw attention. Local news outlets occasionally revisited the story, especially around anniversaries. Each time she hoped that maybe, just maybe, someone who had stayed silent for decades would finally come forward. Her persistence also caught the attention of Montana State University. The university wanted to honor Randy's memory in a lasting way. In 2015, 30 years after his death, they announced the creation of the Randy Church Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing degrees in computer or electrical engineering, fields Randy had loved. For Ruby, the scholarship was bittersweet. "It means the world to know Randy's name will help someone else achieve their dreams," she said. "But it also hurts knowing he never got to achieve his." Every February, when the anniversary of Randy's death approaches, Ruby still writes a message online. Sometimes it's hopeful, sometimes it's angry, but always it's filled with love. "I won't give up," she insists. "It's not in me to quit. My brother deserves answers, and I'll fight for them until the day I can't." In many ways, Ruby became the voice Randy no longer had. Her determination kept the case alive when it could have easily been forgotten. Her advocacy made sure that the people of Bozeman and beyond would remember the name Randall Randy Church. And even as the years stretch on, Ruby's mission stands as a powerful reminder: justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. Someone somewhere knows what happened that night, and Ruby Church isn't giving up until that truth comes to light. Decades have passed since the night Randall Randy Church was murdered inside that small Bozeman Pizza Hut. Yet his story continues to echo through time. To this day, Randy's case remains the only unsolved homicide in Bozeman in over 40 years, a chilling reminder of how, even in close-knit communities, justice can sometimes vanish into silence. But thanks to his family, especially his sister Ruby, that silence has never been allowed to take hold completely. Ruby has made it her life's mission to keep her brother's memory alive. to make sure Randy is more than a cold case number on a dusty file. Every post, every interview, every newspaper mention is a small act of resistance against forgetting. "If I stop talking about Randy," she once said, "then the people who took him win, and I won't let that happen." Her words have inspired countless others who have lost loved ones to unsolved crimes. Through her Facebook group, Somebody Knows Something Somewhere, Randy Church Murder, Ruby connects with families across the United States who share the same pain of unanswered questions. Together they trade stories, advice, and hope. The online community she built has grown beyond what she ever imagined. It has become a beacon for those still waiting for justice. Randy's legacy, however, extends beyond advocacy. Montana State University's Randy Church Memorial Scholarship continues to shape lives every year. Each recipient learns about Randy's story, the brilliant, hard-working engineering student whose life was cut short, and carries a piece of his spirit forward. The scholarship serves not only as a memorial but as a message that out of tragedy, hope and opportunity can still emerge. In interviews, former classmates and friends often describe how Randy's death impacted them deeply. Some remember him as the quiet leader in study groups, others as the guy who always volunteered to help when a car broke down or a project went wrong. His co-workers from Pizza Hut described him as meticulous, respectful, and funny, a young man whose future was full of promise. Losing him felt like losing a part of the town's soul. The Bozeman Police Department has not given up entirely either. Over the years, cold case detectives have revisited Randy's file, reviewing witness statements and re-examining what little physical evidence remains. Advances in forensic technology have brought renewed attention to long-forgotten details, though no breakthroughs have yet come. Investigators acknowledge that someone somewhere still holds the missing piece that could finally bring justice. Ruby continues to believe that day will come. "I know someone knows something," she says. "Maybe they were afraid to talk then. Maybe they thought it didn't matter. But it does. My brother mattered." Her persistence reflects the strength of families who refuse to let their loved ones become statistics. Every February, Ruby honors Randy's memory by visiting his grave. She places a small rocket beside his headstone, a nod to his childhood passion, and talks to him as if he were standing there beside her. "I tell him what I've done that year," she said. "I tell him I'm still fighting. I tell him I love him." In the small Montana community of Bozeman, the name Randy Church still stirs quiet emotion. For those who remember that winter morning in 1985, it's not just a crime. It's a wound that never truly healed. Each new year brings hope that maybe, just maybe, someone will come forward. At the end of her Facebook posts, Ruby always leaves the same message, simple but powerful. "Please, if you know anything, speak up. You might be the one person who can finally bring Randy home." She also includes the Bozeman Police Department cold case tip line, 406-582-2025, and coldcasetipsofbozeman.net, reminding everyone that even the smallest clue could change everything. For Ruby and for all who loved Randy, the pursuit of justice is not just about finding a killer. It's about restoring peace to a family that's waited far too long. It's about proving that compassion, memory, and persistence can outlast even the darkest acts. Randy Church may have been taken too soon, but his story lives on in every scholarship awarded, every post shared, and every person moved to care. His sister's voice carries that legacy forward, ensuring that Bozeman and the world will never forget the young man whose life was stolen, but whose light refuses to fade.